What's the most fitting case of vigilante justice you've ever heard of? All these stories about rapists getting their teeth kicked in or murdered. What about that badass that drove around his town spray painting dongs on all the potholes? That way the city was forced to repair them, not like they were just going to clean the paint and leave the pothole. We need this hero, and okay, there would be so many, they'd change the name to Oklahoma. About 6 years ago in Portland, there was this homeless dude going around jerking off in front of all the lady homeless. So this group of other homeless dudes got sick of his crap. So they waited for him to go into a porta potty one day, then tipped it over on its door with him in it. Funniest thing I've ever heard. Sounds like Portland. A man's son was abducted by his karate teacher and raped over quite a long period of time. The police caught him, and as they were bringing him through the airport, his father pretended to be on a payphone. When the rapist and police walked by, he turned around and shot the rapist in the head, killing him instantly. This was all caught live on the news. The father wasn't charged with murder. He received 5 years probation. The Criminal Perspective podcast did an interview with the son that was really good but very sad. It's called Survivor's Perspective with Jody Plouch. He seems like he's doing really well now. He uses his experience as a way to help child survivors of abuse. I believe he's a therapist or something like that. A 15-year-old boy imitated a 14-year-old girl to attract the attention of a pedophile. When the pedo went to his house, the kid beat him up and called the police on the guy, all done while wearing a Spider-Man mask. I can't find the video, but these guys found out one of their sisters was being lured by a pedo, got her to give him their address and fake a story about no one being home, and they beat the ever-living crap out of him. Super satisfying watch. A guy caught a man raping his daughter. By the time the cops got to the scene, the man was bruised and broken and his face was unrecognizable. He told the police that he might have fallen down the stairs a couple times. They accepted that and arrested the rapist. Okay, not so dark and brutal as most comments here. Czech Republic had its own vigilante hero named Super Vaclav for a time. He sat in a park, and when dog owner did not pick up crap after his dog, Super Vaclav did it for him and spread it on owner's back, or putting out smoker's cigarette on bus stop with bucket or water, etc. It kind of broke my heart when I read it was probably all just some viral marketing stuff. It's more of just justice, but there's the judge that comes up with punishments that fit the crime. A lady left a box of puppies outside, so he ordered her to sleep outside in a box. So presumably, if I rob a toy store, I would need to walk on legs while being covered in slime. When I was a baby, our family was in a bad car accident. My dad got out to check the other driver and he apparently stank of whiskey. Dad dragged him out the car and beat his head off the road. He admitted it to the police when they turned up, and the police apparently said to him, "So that guy must have hit his head on the steering wheel pretty hard then." Dad didn't get in any trouble, and the other driver was either too drunk to know what happened or was in so much trouble anyway he never pressed it any further. My first job was at a tire shop, and I worked with this older guy named Doug. He was around 60, the nicest guy I've ever met. One day at work, a guy and his girl got into a heated argument in our parking lot, and the guy slammed her up against his car. Doug and I saw it, and Doug just looks at me with the tire iron in his hand and goes, "1 sec." He walks over to the guy, drops his tire iron, and slams the guy in the ground. He whispered something to him that I couldn't hear from where I was, but the guy got up and opened the passenger door for her and they drove away. Doug walked back over and just started working on a car like nothing ever happened. I'll never forget it. And then she got the crap beat out of her when they got home. A pretty infamous pedophile was released from prison in Ireland a few years back, and for weeks after his release, wherever he went there were stories of people beating the crap out of him till he eventually had to leave the country. No one else was ever charged for the beatings. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and defend pedophiles. 2 of my schools had a rash of them, and some of the victims were friends of mine. But I'm interested to know if people think this is vigilante justice, or just post-justice torture. I remember a newspaper article going around the internet about a junkie robbing a store. While fleeing, he was stopped by a few Marines on leave, and he stabbed one of them. He then ended up tripping and breaking both his arms, 7 ribs, his jaw and his nose, losing most of his teeth. and crushing his windpipe. As I recall, the dude robbed the Girl Scouts outside of a Walmart. Then he tripped on the curb, resulting in a laundry list of injuries. There was a serial rapist on St. Thomas Usby a few years ago that was really scaring everybody. He predominantly targeted what we called expats, who are usually white foreigners coming to work service industry jobs. The locals rely almost entirely on tourism for income, so this is bad news and bad for business. There were posters everywhere for weeks. The docks, ferries, airport all had his face plastered all over the place so he couldn't skip islands. After a while I noticed there weren't any posters anymore of him anywhere in the island. I asked a table of locals and they simply told me that the tide always washes away the trash. He apparently bragged about the rapes in a bar while drunk, and a couple guys offered him a cigarette to get him to step outside. They disappeared his butt and threw him in the ocean. TLDR. Serial rapists in the Caribbean will straight up be murdered and thrown in the ocean. This just in. All serial rapists have won a cruise to the Caribbean. In my hometown, we had a town drunk named T. He was in his 60s when this happened. T was slightly mentally handicapped and always walked home from the bar. One night, a group of teenagers grabbed him and beat him with a crowbar. Miraculously, T lived. Once the names got out of who did the crime, they all got out of because they were 16 with probation. A group of guys, most of them over 6 foot and big, found the boys one by one and beat the living tar out of them. Then, many of us in town donated and paid all T's medical bills off, and in the money raised paid for him to live in a nice apartment the rest of his life. That's adorable. Somewhere in northern Ontario, a few guys bagged a dude, sack on head, and beat him so bad he spent a long time in the hospital. Dude was physically abusing his wife and daughter. Cops came to the high school and questioned people. Everyone knew who did it. Boyfriend of the daughter, but cops dropped all investigations soon after. My dad always tells me this story from when he was in college in NH. He was friendly with the cops in a small town. The story was that a well-known pedophile that attempted to kill himself by OD. The ambulance picked him up, but just drove around until he died. No one missed him. Completely accidentally, I woke up to the sound of a table being knocked over in the living room. I figured that it was my cat and went out in my boxers to yell at him. There was a dude standing wide-eyed in my living room. My roommate used to have tons of parties. If dude had sat down, I would have thought that he was a guest who slept on the couch, but he bolted out the door. I chased. His mistake was running into the back parking lot, because there's nowhere to go from there. I caught him and a fist fight ensued. He was almost passive, only trying to block until I grabbed the wad of cash from his hand. Then, he started punching back. Soon, the sun came out. He ran off. I was so out of it, I pounded on my roommate's window to let me back in. I didn't realize that I was holding his wallet and keys that I took from the guy. I tripped on a purse that was dropped in my doorway. It was from his first victim. Roomie calls the cops. They just made jokes. Burglary investigator comes around that afternoon. I go down to look at mugshots. Turns out that they already had a suspect. Guy had just done 6 months for burglary in an adjoining neighborhood. He went back to jail. I lost a tooth and had a broken nose. Unless you have a weapon and are ready to defend yourself, never run someone down like that. If they pull out a knife or a gun and you aren't similarly armed, you're fricked. In South Africa, vigilante justice is common practice. There was a rapist in one of the communities where a group of men held a man, legs open, and set a dog on his genitals. This is usually followed by a large group beating the person to death. The world used to be a different place. Many years ago, when responding to a domestic disturbance, we didn't call it that. If it was obvious the wife had been beaten, the senior officer would remove his hat and pass it around. Cash was put in the hat by everyone present. Then the most junior officer would take the wife and any children out for dinner. Husband was then tied to a chair and tuned up. At the end of the tune-up, it was explained that in 1 week officers would be returning to inspect the paperwork for a life insurance policy with the wife as beneficiary. If the paperwork did not exist, another tune-up was in order. If the paperwork did exist, an explanation that if they had to respond there again, the wife would be collecting the insurance. This is everything. Freaking dramatic, and I love everything about this. Cowboy boots are expensive, Someone ran into a cowboy store and stole a couple pairs and ran towards the exit. My dad tripped the guy, then sat on him and held his legs against his back while laying on top of him in a cowboy hat and boots. Basically hog-tied the guy till the cops came. I hope that over your dad tripped him. Classic Western sheriff music played. It happened like 5 years ago. In my country there's a huge popular national park close to the city with beautiful mountains, falls, views and all that crap. So it's common to people go there and spend the day walking and doing some picnic in a kind of lonely natural place. Some group of thieves, though it will be a good idea to go there and steal people. They found an isolated couple, stealing and hiding them, then tried to rape the woman. The screaming of this couple attracted the attention from the main group that they was with, the National Martial Arts team. I don't remember the precise kind of martial arts. I'm just say 2 of the burglars had to be evacuated in chopper duty state. Don't worry, all of them survived. Don't worry, all of them survived. Why you gotta do that? A guy tried to stab me in the eye with a lockback, wouldn't hand over my wallet. His dealer got wind of it, spiked him with acid and dumped him in the woods at night to find his own way home. From what I am told it was a 15-mile walk to the nearest town. I don't even buy from the dude. People who act irrationally are bad for your image. If you're a dealer and it's known you don't tolerate that kind of fuckery, the neighborhood is less likely to see you as a criminal. Had a friend who got a cash pay landscaping job. Worked his 2 weeks then payday came. Boss laughed in his face and told him to frick off. No record of him ever working there. Friend did some landscaping on the guy's kneecap. No pay, but none needed said my friend. Got his money's worth. No charges either. Not personally there for the event itself, but I saw the aftermath. Guy shows up for Saturday work in a call center office drunk. There are no managers in or anything to make him go home. He flips out and assaults one of the female members of staff for some reason. Enough that a missed blow actually leaves a dent crack in one of the, not very good in the first place, walls. Let's just say when he came in Monday to collect his stuff, and officially be fired since again, no managers, he was not looking in good condition. His face was covered in bruises and he looked an absolute mess still. From what I heard, basically every male employee, as soon as they realized what was going on, they were in a side room so it took a few moments, especially as it's a call center so headsets and ambient noise, descended on him, pummeled him and restrained him. I'm fairly sure the females who were there at the time might have joined in too but I didn't hear for sure. As I said, I just saw the wall on the Monday, and the state of the guy when he was escorted back in by like 4 people to collect his stuff and escorted right back out. The beating he looked like he received was certainly beyond the minimal force needed to restrain. Female employee was unharmed too. I think she managed to simply evade his drunken attempts at hitting her. I knew this dude whose daughter lived alone. She started noticing things being randomly moved around in her apartment, so her dad and his buddies snuck into her apartment and had her leave. Some dude picked the lock and walked in. They beat the dude with baseball bats and threw him in a car and drove him to the middle of nowhere Arkansas and dumped him. Arkansas is basically all woods or farm fields for those who don't know. She never had a problem after that. Another story I have about a similar topic. My aunt married this dude who was very handsome and charismatic. Turns out he was abusive as heck. My aunt had bruises all over. So my dad, uncle and grandpa went over and talked with him. My aunt and that guy divorced soon after. My dad would never tell me what they did to the guy. A prison guard accidentally left a convicted child molester in a holding cell with many other inmates. The child molester got a massive beating once the other inmates found out what he was in for. I've heard similar stories. It's interesting how even among convicts child abuse is taboo. Warning. NSFL story. I don't know if the video I saw was real, but I think I came across it sometime around 2009 to 2010. I think it happened in France, but I can't remember. Heads up, I'm not researching the validity of the events, and I encourage anyone to disprove it, as it is pretty fricked up. Anyway, I'll keep it as short as possible. Two teenagers were being groomed by an old married doctor, looked to be at least in his 70s in the video, and they agreed to allow him to take them out for dinner to celebrate a recent high school team victory. According to the story, they knew exactly what his intentions were. The video starts with them hiding and turning on a camera in what seems to be a small living room. A minute or so later, the old man comes into the shot from a hallway in the back, wearing nothing but underwear. The boys push him into the bathroom on camera left. Let me tell you, the screams of that old pedo being stabbed from sounded like at least 20 times still haunt me to this day. I've seen plenty of fricked up videos from the dark annals of the internet, but this one always takes the cake. The whimpering, the cries, the way a man can be turned into fear incarnate within moments of realizing their life is now forfeit. That kind of thing sticks with you forever. The boys then shut the door on him and lightly ransacked the room for valuables. They left the room for about a minute, and you can see the door to the bathroom creak open, and the old man takes a couple steps into the threshold. It took about 3 seconds for there to be a pool of blood about 3 feet wide under his feet, before they came back in, pushed him to the ground back into the bathroom, gave him a couple good pokes for good measure, and then walked to the camera while smiling and giving a thumbs up before the footage is cut. They had been planning on baiting him into his own death for attempting to groom both of the underage boys. I still don't know how real the video was, but I do know I didn't find it on a site where something like this is usually faked. I find it hard to believe something like this can be faked. If they were stabbing him and you could see open wounds and whatnot, they would have to be some pretty good makeup artists or whatever. In 10th grade, friend I knew since 3rd grade started dating a girl I knew since 8th grade. She started becoming more isolated and he never brought her out cause she was shy or didn't like hanging around guys. Turns out he was beating her on the regular. Bad and in several different ways. We had no idea. Lots of really bad stuff. She finally confided in me and I didn't know what to do. So I found a time to run until her uncle, BF, had forbidden contact from any of us to anyone she knew by this point. IL quietly let him know and told him he had to do something quick. Well, he was a police officer. Well, he took him out into the middle of nowhere desert with some friends, other cops, and beat the ever-living crap out of him. Middle of the night. Complete darkness out there. Left him in his underwear and let him walk home. It wasn't unusual for him to go missing for a day or two, but at some point his mom called the police. The cop uncle shows up, let her know she needed to take care of things with him or worse things happen to bad dumb fricks. They left. No report. Eventually he gets home, go to doc, drops out of school. He knows we all now know what a piece of crap he was. Uncle Cop told her never to worry again. This is the only time in my life where I've liked police brutality. Pretty much every child molester that goes to prison. Prison inmates usually beat the crap out of them. Heard of a guy who got multiple broomsticks up his anus and bled to death. Forensics estimated that he was alive for a few hours after the beating. A slow, painful death. Another guy was forcibly tattooed on the face by an inmate who wrote out Katie's revenge on his forehead. I've heard some guards stand and let it happen for a while, then they intervene before it gets too serious. This is some personal vigilante justice. My sister was abused by a guy she was dating in high school but never spoke up about it until after the relationship was finally over. My brother and I always had our suspicions, but she always had an excuse as to why she had a bruise somewhere. She finally confided to my brother and I after a few months and we were ready to kill him. Well, a couple months later we went down the shore for a family vacation and the shitbag ended up being down the shore also. We tracked him through Snapchat and ran into him and his friends on the boardwalk. We acted all buddy-buddy with him and he was down to smoke some weed with us later on. The plan came into effect a little while later after my brother and I took a couple swings of some Justice whiskey that I smuggled from my parents' supply. We meet him under the boardwalk and just unleash on him. The kid never expected it and neither did his friends. They just watched as their piece of crap friend kept getting punched in the face. We finally decided that he may have possibly learned his lesson and let him go, bloody and mangled. We go back to the house like nothing happened and then the kid's mom calls my mom, flipping out and threatening to have us arrested. My sister then comes clean about her abuse and had the pictures to prove it. The mother cooled off a little and then started freaking out at her son for abusing a girl and saying he completely deserved it, as my brother and I were cracking up listening to it on the speaker. See, that is a good parent. She was at first protecting her son from a random jumping different from a fight. Upon realizing her son was the butt, she flipped on him. Some people would literally just deny the fact that their kid messed up. A couple of guys on the island where I live were robbing all kinds of people and stores in the low season. They robbed the wrong store and a couple of days later their bodies were found in a very public place, shot multiple times. It was the best justice the island has had in some time. Alright, I'm a bit late to this thread, but I'll give my piece. This was over a decade ago. I was in middle school and this one girl just terrorized everyone, saying most hateful, disgusting things, especially racist. She came from a wealthy family and definitely acted like it. She had made my friends cry on multiple occasions. Months of multiple people reporting her for bullying, mental and physical. Nothing was done. No action was taken. We figured we could ignore it, until my little sister ran up to my friends and I sobbing. She couldn't even talk, she was so heartbroken. She finally spit it out. This girl had pushed my sister to the ground, insulted her weight. We are both super skinny, no matter how much we eat. But at the time we were extremely poor, so we didn't get to eat much. Spit in her face and told her to kill herself. For no reason. My sister never even talked to her. I went with my sister to the office and they gave the same runaround they had given for months. Basically saying they couldn't do anything about it. So at lunch, in the quad, in front of everyone, I beat the living crap out of her. This wasn't a girl fight with hair pulling. This was me sitting on top of her, laying my fist into her face one after another until I was pulled off. She never bothered anyone again and would turn the complete opposite way anytime she saw me. That 10-day suspension was 100% worth it. A female cop posing as a teenage girl was talking to her pedophile online and made plans to run away with him and everything. The dude didn't have a car though and they lived in completely separate states. Dude straight up started walking to this teen's house to get her. He walked 300 something miles and took him like 2 or 3 days just to knock on her door and police answer LMFAO. That is some dang dedication. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.